Hello, Stellar people, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Trey, and we are continuing with the 100-Day March, which is to make a comic 24 pages in 100 days. So now let's look at the schedule. So I have this brief planning thing for this is week 2. The day I post this will be the 18th of March. So week 2, the 18th of this 100-Day March, and we will be going over character and stories. So let's get started. So the story is going to be about Beautiful Beast Kiss, who is here, and she hops through dimensions, and every dimension she goes to, she changes form. So for example, she could be super chibi in one, and a very adult version in another, and everything in between. It was a way for me to experiment with styles, and she's my herald, my sun tiger. And so she is a very action-oriented character. She likes action. She's not much of a thinker. She's all, she'll go in. She just wants to have fun, right? Everything is an adventure to her, and she likes to fight. So in this chapter 3, which is what I'm doing this time, these are some of the characters that she meets. And I usually try to have some kind of similarities between characters. Like I try to have her as the basis of the other characters within the story, although, she can look wildly different, so sometimes I play with that. But characters that she can meet in chapter, and I'm breaking it up into 2, 12 and 12 for the 24 pages. The first 12 pages are these characters. We have the Moon Rabbit Bunny, we have Birdie, and we have DC, the Demon Cat. DC for short. And she meets these characters in the first 12. And then there will be a transition or a scene change. And in the second half, the last 12, she will then have a battle with the antagonist of the later half of the story. And then after that, we'll transition into chapter 4. So those are the 24-page plan. But let's talk about scenario writing or making a story. So there are different ways to make a story. Usually characters and story are done in tandem, done together, because the scenario is going to have the characters going through that scenario. So usually they're thought about at the same time. And they don't have to be super well defined in the beginning. Just a brief kernel of an idea of what you want. Now, I'm not much of a writer. I'm not the writing type. I like to see it. So I usually just draw out my stories in little thumbnail form. But for others who are the writers, right, any program will do, a word typing program. And usually this is a example of another comic that I'm doing. And I usually have the title, the main characters, and then the villain. The villain is usually the driver of the story. It is their want that causes the hero to act. And so they are usually a main focus of the story. And then there are sub-characters, characters that aren't going to be drawn as much as the main characters, the main cast. So usually I try to work out the main cast first, villain also at the same time, and then sub-characters, I can go get a little goofy and wacky with them because they're not going to be seen as much as the mains. So try to lock down the mains as soon as possible, or have a very strong idea about who's going to be in it and what their part is. Is it large or small? And then after that, I think of themes. What are the themes that I'm trying to get across in the story? It could be about failure, duty, friends, death, some type of a theme that is like an overarching idea or concept for the scenario. I try to usually have something like that in place before I start. And then I start the story. And there are many ways to do it. Right? You can be one of those that just writes what's happening. Character, Main hero does this, and then goes here and does this, and then meets this character and does this. That's one way. Another is to break down a page where you have page 1, and then you type out, does a brief of the scenario, main character on the moon, and then you can write out the characters they meet and dialogue and thought bubbles. That would be closer to a way I would do it, because I like to think about what is the thought bubbles and what is the dialogue that is happening between characters, or when a character is just thinking to themselves, right? The inner monologue and whatnot. And others, they can write the scenario and then plug in character emotions, dialogue between the characters, any random feelings, items, descriptions. Right? You can get pretty detailed with it, but it all depends on what your style is. But for myself, I rarely write like this. It's mostly like this, where I like to draw out these little tiny thumbnails, and I try to do them as fast as possible. So it may be over a day or a couple of days, maybe a week, to get out the whole story written, drawn in this format. And we start off with the first page, which is going to be a right side page, a right hand page. All odds will be on the right side. And then you will turn the page for page 2, which will be a left hand side page. So all evens are on the left, all odds are on the right. And it's good to keep that idea of page turns when you're making a comic book. And in the West, we read from left to right, upper to lower. So up, down, left, right. And usually in the bottom left, I try to have something that will cause a page turn. Right? We want to keep our audience moving. Right? Continue reading, upper left, lower right, and there's something at the corner that'll make you go, I wonder what happens on the next page. And they keep moving along. So this is my version. These are really, really, really simple. It's pretty much just a step up above a stick figure, and stick figures can work. They can get your point across. I have the characters and the dialogue written, and I just made these in Photoshop. Nothing too strenuous. And I just moved through the whole book. And I have an idea of the page panels and all of that, but I don't need that at this point. I'm just trying to get my ideas out. And then the second half is more battle oriented. And so I have ideas for that, and then transitioning into what would be the next chapter. And that is how I usually do the comics. This is another visual way to do it, where I'm just putting the pages side by side, going from left to right. And so on the first page, or the first group, right, this would be a left. Number 1 would be the right-hand side page. Turn the page, and that would be a left and a right. So even on the left, it's on the right. And I try to think about what the viewer is seeing. Does it read? Can it be understood? And I try to just get all those ideas out in the simplest of forms. Now let's talk about a comic book page. For a comic book page, there are various styles. The standardized form of a comic book page, this is a Strathmore, but there are other types that can be found on the internet. But I usually use this one, where I've scanned it in and it's just a single page. And up top it has your information, your name, date, What is the book? What is the issue? What is the page number? And then there's all these guide in blue lines that you can get rid of in Photoshop. You don't want to go past the bleeds, right? This very outside edge is the bleed. You want to keep things within this first dotted line, just inside of the bleed. And then all really important information needs to be within this innermost dotted line. And we draw things larger and then shrink them down when it is printed in comic book form. So feel free to take a screenshot of this if you wish to use it for your own comic project. And we'll go over more of this next month when we're getting heavier into formatting. So that is a comic page. Let's talk about character design and how I draw. All right, so my advice is to go from simple to complex. Simple to complex, right? These are just ideas on the character Beautiful Beast Kiss and a little bit of Mach Ton, but I usually these are just circle-headed, very loose, rough sketches. Right? Most of my work starts off in this form. Just very, very simple, very loose. And let's take this image right up here as an example. I drew it again with all of these others, and I took that image, I isolated it, I blew it up, and then I make iterations of that. I can draw on top of it while fading it back to, and I'm trying to make it better or get more in line with what I have in mind. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect off the bat. It doesn't have to be everything there functioning, right? We're moving in phases. It doesn't have to look like the final form. It can just be a stick figure, very loose, very rough sketch, just to get you started, get your idea out, and then we move to more complex drawings. Simple to complex. Now let's talk about some troubles that you might encounter. What are some of the things that might go awry? If this is your first time, I would start the smallest that you can possibly do, and that would be a 4-page comic, 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, folded in half, and in that you have the very protoform of a book, where you have the front cover, you open it, and there would be a 2-page spread, and in the back would be the resolution or the conclusion. That is the most simple, easiest, bare bones story that one can make. If you can do that, you can move on to higher realms of complexity. So a 12-page comic, or you could also do an 8-page, so multiples of 4, right? We're trying to think of multiples of 4. 4-page comic is the easiest, briefest, simplest. An 8-page comic would be 2 of those. This would be a 12, and then double that, and that's 24. But start simply, 4-page, then a 12-page. I'm moving on to, this is the 3rd chapter. And I started first with 3 12-page comics. And now moving up to 24-page. And this is, it's not super deep. I'm just having fun with this, right? This isn't a project I'm like thinking about, deep themes or incredible, mind-blowing, genre shifting stuff. This is just me having fun, me playing around. And that's another thing. Have a story that is as simple as you can get it. right? You don't want your magnum opus to be your first comic. Build up to that, right? Get some reps under your belt, get your ideas out on paper, and see where you can improve. Things that you didn't know before that you do now, and can take those lessons into the next project. Also, size and scope. Like, for example, Beautiful Beast Kiss is my main character, and sometimes if I can just get her in one scenario, like the background is one place, like her on the moon, and that's an easier way of doing things than having, so she's on the moon, and then she goes to hell, and then she goes to heaven, and then she goes to outer space again, and now she's microscopic and she's going through this huge fantasy land, right? You want to keep it as simple as possible in the beginning. And also, limits are good. If this is your first time, a limited style, limited coloration, or you could just do black and white, it's all good. But limits are good. And if you haven't done any of this before, try to make it as limited, as small, as condensed as possible. One character, maybe two people that this character meets, and a very simple story. But yeah, that's some of the things you might encounter as problems on this creation journey. The schedule again, and this is the end of week 2, the 18th of March, and next week will be the last week in March, and we're going to do some milestone thoughts. I'm still trying to put this all together. And so I have it broken down by month, the 100-day march, starting in March. We have this mostly done, and I kind of have an idea of what we're going for. April is going to be mainly a penciling month to solidify the story, characters, camera shots, all of that. And in this 5-week span, we're going to get that put together. May is going to be mostly an inking month, and maybe inking and color. Colors, again, won't be complex, but I want to get some colors in here. And June is putting it all together, and the end. And that is the plan, man. So I will see you next week for week 3, where we will go over milestones. And I will see you then. So I have been Trey. You can find my work at treyhodges.com. Power to all the creators, and I will see you next week. Take care, keep shining. Bye.